The positivists differed from classicalists in one major respect, and that was crime is not a freely willed phenomena alone. Every crime is a determined phenomena. There was a kind of free will versus determinism between classicalists and positivists. It was free will conceptualization of crime not only provided a strong and multifaceted explanation for crime in the 18th century, but also tends to provide the most satisfactory rational justification even today. The positivists propounded a view that crime is determined and not freely willed. The determinism of crime was on account of factors that lay beyond the free will of the criminal, either in his biology or in his psyche or in his environment. The psychological determinists treated every crime as a consequence of psychological factors. The sociological determinists treated every crime as a consequence of psychological factors. Therefore, the positivists made a clear-cut departure from classicalist line of thinking. They said crime is determined, and determinism became a new criteria for explaining criminality. The positivists propounded a new view that crime is determined, not freely willed. The determinism of crime was on account of factors that lay beyond the free will of the criminal, either in his biology or in his psyche or in his environment, leading to the school of biological determinism, the school of psychological determinism, the school of environmental determinism. And psychological determinists treated every crime as a consequence of psychological factors. Sociological determinists treated every crime as a consequence of sociological factors. Therefore, these determinists brought a kind of element of scientific determinism in the field of criminological explanations of crime and criminality. Now, the positivists were themselves divided into liberal positivists of crime and radical positivists of crime. Now, liberal positivists of crime agreed that legal system reflects the freely chosen contracts between rational man and liberal state. They strive to develop a moral yardstick built on positive scientific lines for the diminution of unwanted behavior that is based on assumption that there exists a social and moral consensus in the society. As against this, the radical positivist position on crime is the reduction of criminality is affected by unscientific ways in which the rule-breaking individuals are handled by the police, judges, and the correctional officials. The three major points of departure for evolving a different moral calculus independent of law was suggested by radical positivists, and the 3 points of departure were: first, there exists certain fundamental human sentiments, violation of which indicates the presence of real crime. Second, it may be possible to specify a consensus which could be quite distinct from the edicts of legal system. Now, the liberal positivist view of crime, the positivist thinking about crime and criminality is divided into 2 categories. One, that of liberal positivist view of crime. The liberal positivists agree that the legal system reflects the freely chosen contracts between rational man and liberal state. They strive to develop a moral yardstick built on positive scientific lines for the diminution of unwanted behavior that is based on assumption that there exists a social and moral consensus in the society. The radical positivists, on the contrary, say that reduction of criminality is affected by the unscientific way in which the rule-breaking individuals are handled by the police, the judges, and the correctional officials. The three major points of departure for evolving a moral calculus independent of law propounded by radical positivists are: first, there exists certain fundamental human sentiment, violation of which indicates the presence of real crime. Second, it may be possible to specify a consensus which could be quite distinct from the edicts of the legal system. Third, it is possible to make appeal to certain real system needs against which the acts or the law are really dysfunctional. Now, the fourth major thinking about crime and criminological explanation of crime is given by radical thinking about crime and criminality. The radical thinkers radical view emerged in the 1960s that came as a challenge to the hegemony of both classicalism and positivism. In this sense, that both classicalism and positivism were either looking to the crime phenomena or to the criminal, his factors that influence his behavior. But they were accepting the system as non-problematic. As against this, the radicals, Professor Wolfgang had said in 1942, one of his writings, that we have looked long enough to the crime or the criminal, but it is time for us to look to the rotting criminal justice system, the system by which crime is defined and the system by which the criminals are handled. Therefore, they shifted the focus from crime and criminal to the criminal justice system. The radical thinking about crime and criminality can be categorized into two main streams: the interactionist or the labeling theory stream. Crime is merely a label that people in dominant position are able to attach on someone who is in an inferior position. The second radical stream was critical theorists or Marxist stream. They believe the causes of crime to be rooted in the economic, social and political fabric of the society and can be tackled only by effecting major changes in the fabric. As against these four major criminological explanations, there is a fifth, and which is the dominant one, the authoritative version of duly enacted crime. Duly enacted crime says crime is a harmful human conduct that sovereign desires to prevent by infliction of punishment. Crime requires that it should be an outcome of exercise of political sovereign's legislative power. Therefore, if the legislature is free, the sovereign is free to make crimes. The instances are like SC&ST, Atrocities Prevention Act of 1989, the POCSO Act of 2012, the Indian Penal Code, under which diverse categories of crimes are lumped together, and the Indian Penal Code happens to be of 1860 vintage. Professor Andrew Ashworth describes the principle of core of criminal law as, Professor Andrew Ashworth was very critical of the way in which over-criminalization is rampant in UK, and crimes have been made without keeping in mind the core principles of criminal law. And he identified the four core principles: censor persons for substantial wrongdoing. For small wrongdoings, criminal law use is not desirable. He said punishment must be given proportionate to the seriousness of the wrongdoing. disproportionate punishment, according to him, was a violation of core principle of criminal law. The third was wrongdoers should be afforded due process protections, and they should not be, if they are to be subjected to criminal law, they should not be subjected to without due process protections. And finally, the fourth point, core principle of criminal law, dished out by Professor Andrew Ashworth, is there should be equal treatment and proportionality between processes of criminal law. Therefore, if they are not there, now explanations of crime and its relationship with punishment. Now this is very important, that since criminal behavior, being freely willed, is assumed to be delivering pleasure to the wrongdoer, the state becomes justified in the infliction of pain of punishment. Two distinct approaches of punishments are the just desert approach, the therapeutic or treatment approach. Now the just desert approach to punishment assumes three things. Every punishment must fit the crime or the legal infraction. The second, the same punishment must be inflicted for similar crimes. And the third, nature of crime and frequency of criminals' involvement ought to be the sole basis for the quantum of punishment. Now the therapeutic approach, on the contrary, says that punishment is to be given as a measure of individualization. Therefore, individualization of punishment is the sine qua non of every punishment. As a measure of therapy, punishment may be justified on account of retribution, deterrence, incapacitation, and reform of the wrongdoer. The third component of therapeutic approach is act of punishment should be addressed to the needs of each wrongdoer, which could be repressive and harsh, and soft and reform oriented on the other end. Fourth, pure treatment oriented model of punishment lies at the foundation of juvenile justice system throughout the world. And fifth therapeutic approach component is the correctional approach and compromise of techniques such as mediation or reconciliation, etc., has evolved from therapeutic approach itself. Therefore, therapeutic approach is with lot more possibilities and lot more unexhausted implications. Now we come to the conclusion. We have discussed in this paper so far various criminological explanations, why crimes are explained in different historical period differently. Different ideological ideas have been weaved in the explanation of crime and criminality in different historical periods. Various criminological explanations of crime and criminality affects the criminal policy and their consequent changes on the norms relating to crime and criminalization itself. The explanation of crime and criminality not only helps to identify the multiple ways in which crime can be explained. The third conclusion is that the diverse explanations also impact the thinking on punishment and suggest ways and means of punitive reforms themselves. Therefore, this is a very important area for learning for the listeners and students. Thank you.